Everybody. Thanks for being here. Here we go. I'm going to go ahead and share the screen. Ignore those notes. All right. So thank you, Christine, for having us out tonight. We're so grateful to be here with you on a Tuesday evening in the middle of the week to share our experience and our hope for the future. In her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, Robin Wall Kimmerer speaks of reciprocity as the foundation of the Potawatomi culture. She describes the wisdom that was acquired by observing and interacting with nature for thousands of years. It would be safe to assume that this happened on every continent, around the world as well. And as developing humans, we learned how to survive and then thrive in concert with nature for millennia. Somewhere along the line, our clever, innovative minds found ways to make it easier to function, live, and thrive through inventions. We might say that this is where our ego minds separated from our eco minds. Our thought processes evolved, which means our practices evolved, unfortunately separating our awareness from ourselves and from a holistic view of living systems. Past records have illustrated how many civilizations have collapsed due to the overuse and overextraction of their resources, the rise of agriculture, and the destruction of their soil. Our processes and practices at Studio Petrichor that we're about to share with you are our approach and how we choose to function in our work and also in our lives. This knowledge is based on global indigenous wisdom and practices, the failure of collapsed cultures, our research and observations of living in concert with nature. Our mission moving forward is to be co-creators with nature and inspire you to do the same.
We can both agree that our exposure to nature in our formative years has influenced our work today. As it turns out, if you're to become friends with plants, you are to become familiar with their counterparts, soil, carbon, water, and biodiversity. All things are connected, and this is what supports community above and below ground. Let's shift the energy around this talk. Rather than focus on the climate crisis, let's focus on solutions. And in order to find meaningful solutions, we must ask the right questions. This presentation would not be possible without the mutual reciprocity and support of these organizations. And we are grateful to Kiss the Ground, LA Sanitation, the Climate Reality Project, Pasadena Water and Power, the Gabrielino Quiche Nation, and the LA County Arboretum. So today's content, here's an outline: the current problem, a path or process to solutions, weaving it all together, our experiences, and our actions. And then we want to invite you to join us. So how do we design for transition to a new world?
Well, before we can answer that, let's look at the facts. Humans have been living in a degenerative, destructive relationship with nature. Sustainability is a great effort, but it isn't nearly enough. If we want to thrive alongside with nature in harmony, we must start thinking and acting regeneratively.
You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. Thank you, Bucky. So how does my landscape function? Imagine your garden, or choose a garden in your community, a front yard, a parkway, a hill strip, something that you encounter regularly. Even if you don't care about it, pretend that you do for a minute. You most likely live in a multi-residential urban complex community, a single-family home community, or even on a homestead farm. Ask yourself, how does this landscape function? Is it teeming with life, or is it struggling to get by? Is it on a life support system? Is it being watered regularly to maintain its beauty? Think about it. Now, compare that to what you would see in nature. Put yourself on a walk through an oak woodland or a hike in a remote mountain range. Ask yourself, how does a landscape function in nature? More specifically, how does an ecosystem function in nature? There's an important distinction between landscapes we create and control versus ones that rely on their natural, complementary, reinforcing, and regenerative systems. Now come back to that garden you were imagining. Can we acknowledge that we have enforced our ideas of what a garden should be and how it should perform for us alone? We're going to illustrate how we can be co-creators rather than enforcers. What we realized is that landscape design has been all about landscape control. Do plants, insects, animals, even watersheds adhere to geopolitical or property line boundaries? Can we consider that ownership is an illusion or a construct, just like control? We were born with obligations, every one of us, as well as privileges, to care for and interact with the beings on this planet, not to tame them into submission. To be more specific about our relationship to the land, at Studio Petrichor, we focus on supporting a reciprocal relationship with nature, and we weave this knowledge into our design work and our education.
So most of us here already know this. We do not need to go into the science and proof behind global warming. However, if you in the audience are interested in a presentation specifically on climate change and global warming, please reach out to us. Be sure to sign up for our newsletter and reach out to us through our website and follow us on Instagram. There are much more presentations out there that we offer. This is one in particular, so I will be adding more to the chat box later. Just something real quick. Our planet's functions are changing rapidly. The jet stream is becoming wavier. Steeper troughs and higher ridges mean weather systems progress more slowly, raising the chances for long duration extreme events like droughts, floods, and heat waves. This is really important to know.
We're experiencing accelerated entropy due to a warming climate and what is being called a positive feedback loop. Climate feedback loops are processes that can either amplify or diminish the effects of climate forcings. This is weird and awkward. If it's positive, why is it worse? Here's an example. Oh, those forest fires. The planet is getting hotter. We have more fires. We have more drought. We have more heat going into the atmosphere and more carbon into the atmosphere, which is a feedback loop, a negative feedback loop.
Positive.
Pardon? I'm
Positive.
sorry, positive feedback.
Worse.
I can't wait to get to the negative feedback loop. This is a positive feedback loop or a worse feedback loop. This is one of our favorite photos that pretty much sums up the current state of affairs. It's laughable because it's true, and it's also incredibly sad because it's true. Apathy is a serious problem. The problems are so overwhelming, it's easy to shut down, to numb ourselves, to go golfing and hope it passes, right? This also includes hoping for the best, but not taking affirmative action. Do we want to get out of this mess, or at least rise to the challenge and make an effort? Action starts with education. Real hope looks like action.
We must shift our behaviors and our current ways of thinking. Here's a powerful statement and fact. The average American has a 16-ton per year carbon footprint. But to have a chance at staying below 2 degrees warming, the average American needs to have a footprint of under 2 tons per year. That's an 87.5% change in behavior. It's rational to feel overwhelmed, a little bit scared right now, but what you're feeling is valid. You are not alone. Grief and anger move through us when we get into action. Hope is only useful if we're undertaking actions to keep that hope alive. It's time to live regeneratively. There are so many ways we can do this in our homes, in our communities, but we're going to share with you how we reconnect with the land and help Mother Earth to regenerate. And this is an opportunity to reimagine how we invent and reinvent how we as community members, municipalities, and landscape design professionals do things in our lives and our work. So the solution is regenerative, but let's take a look at that. So over here on the left, you see this degenerative model, which is what we're in here. Degenerative basically represents destroying, depleting, reducing, and killing. The sustainable model, which we're not even close to, is surviving and maintaining. It's cyclical. However, the regenerative model is allowing for thriving, renewing, recreation, and abundance. Think about it. Yeah. Think about it. What is true sustainability? It isn't food imported from 3 states over. It isn't water piped from miles away. And it isn't the helicopter flying overhead, putting more carbon in the atmosphere. Sorry, I had to say that. SCE, thank you. And it is not sending your recyclables to a factory that just burns more energy. True sustainability is the regenerative model, is the result of a regenerative model. It's making use of what we have. It's in our own 2 hands. True sustainability is actually in our backyard and in our community. Creating regenerative systems is not simply a technical, economic, ecological, or social shift. It has to go hand in hand with an underlying shift in the way we think about ourselves, our relationships with each other, and life as a whole. I think someone needs to be on mute. Thanks. So how do we start? We start from the beginning. Step 1, we look at the soil. We look to the soil for the solution. Our lives depend on healthy living soil. But really quickly, what is soil? Well, physically, it's 50% solid space and 50% void space, with a little room in there for soil organic matter. And that is the distinction between living soil and dirt. 95% of all land-based organisms exist in our topsoil. Microbial activity also drives the process of aggregation, which enhances soil structural stability, aeration, infiltration, and water holding capacity. All living things above and below ground benefit when the plant microbridge is functioning effectively. A plant root is very similar to our lower intestines. A plant acquires nutrient from the outside and the other from the inside. Having a healthy microbiome is essential to health for both plants and animals. So this is the magic that we look for in the soil. Most people think that roots just take, and that's not true. They also give. The hyphae of a mycorrhizal fungi, shown here, right here in this illustration, is a single cell wide. And what they do is they exude an acid to penetrate the root cell wall to facilitate a nutrient exchange between the fungi and the roots. The fungus receives sugars from the plants, and in exchange, the plant receives sugars, nutrients, water. The plant receives nutrients, water, protection from pathogens, and most importantly, information. Although ecologically influential, the soil fungi are extremely fragile, and the use of fungicides, pesticides, inorganic fertilizers, or any other physical chemical factors can reduce or eliminate them. Here's an image of mycorrhizal fungi taking advantage of cardboard only 3 weeks after a lasagna mulching workshop.
Yes.
This is one of our many efforts to support an underground community as well as transform waste materials into healthy living soil. So for those of you who haven't heard of desertification, it is a global epidemic, and we've already lost 1/3 of our arable land in just the past 40 years. Desertification is a term that applies to the man-made destruction of the underlying soil resource to such a degree that it can no longer support life. Desertification is not only around a desert, it can occur anywhere. Desertification is not the result of drought, although droughts can exacerbate the process. It is a man-made phenomenon. It's not drought that causes bare ground, it's bare ground that causes droughts. The bottom line in this section, a healthy soil microbiome equals a healthy planet. Second, we create an alliance. Let's get really comfortable with carbon. So this is an image that represents how finite our resources are. This was taken from the International Space Station. It's not unique because it's important that it represents the true nature of the sky. When you're outside looking up at the sky, it seems like this vast, limitless expanse. But if you were to drive an automobile at normal interstate highway speed straight up into the air, you would reach the top of that space in about 5 to 10 minutes where you couldn't breathe anymore. That's the thinness of this space. And this is the space that we just happen to be using as an open sewer for the gaseous waste of our civilization. Currently, we are spewing 152 million tons of man-made global warming pollution into that thin shell of our atmosphere every 24 hours, as if it were an open sewer. And to add to that, COVID-19 death rates in the US are 8% higher in counties with higher than average fine particle air pollution. These are just some of the effects of the air pollution. Here's another one. In a real world study with CO2 and soybeans, aphids and Japanese beetles were drawn to plants with more raised elevated CO2 conditions. Beetles that fed on high CO2 leaves lived longer and laid more eggs.
Yikes.
And high CO2 levels also lowered the plant's natural defenses, making them virtually helpless against plant-eating pests. So what do we do with this? The bottom line, if you can remember these 3 facts, you are on your way to greatness. Where there's carbon in the soil, there's water. Where there's water in the soil, there's life. And without soil life, we are truly lost. This is why I'm here. I have always loved plants. Plants have been dear to me. And it just so happens that plants are so awesome that they literally they're literally built from thin air. They are solar-powered carbohydrate-making machines that move carbon from the air and put it into the ground where it belongs. Without carbon and oxygen in the soil, with microbes, fungi, plant roots all working together, carbon is depleted from our soils, water will run off, carrying topsoil, pollution, pesticides, and more. And then this ends up poisoning our waterways and our water supplies, and in Los Angeles, our ocean. The movement of carbon from the atmosphere to the soil via green plants represents the most powerful tool we have at our disposal for the restoration of soil function and the reduction of atmospheric CO2. In the upper left corner is a microscopic image of a plant stomata. The function is to absorb CO2 and release oxygen. But to us, it's a beautiful CO2 monster. Carbon sequestration in the soil and vegetation has the technical potential to reduce atmospheric CO2 levels by 156 parts per million this century. So that was plants supporting sequestration. There are some other ways that we can sequester carbon into the soil. Leigh?
One of our favorite techniques at Studio Petrichor is to harvest water, sequester carbon, support living soil, and enhance biodiversity through Hugelkultur. Hugelkultur means mound culture in German. And as we look at this image, on the top left is a Hugelkultur bed after 1 month, after 1 year to the top right, bottom left after 2 years, and after 20 years. We have locked up a lot of carbon. Here's how we do it. We like to start with a small trench for water to settle and soak, but you don't have to do that. We layer the bottom of the trench and areas around the hugel with cardboard. That invites mycorrhizal fungi. It jumpstarts the hugel biology. We layer in as much green waste, such as trimmings, mulches, palm fronds, and other chunky items as we layer in soil. Compostable packaging like pizza boxes, egg carton containers, other items made from carbon-based life and compromised wood help to create another foundational layer. Then, as we are above the surrounding finished grade, we add smaller logs and branches. And then more green waste and soil. It's kind of like lasagna. And we are building upwards until we get that large logs up high. Why do we want to do that? Because those logs have thermal mass. Thermal mass is easiest to understand when you think about having a cold drink in your hand, not even on a hot day, just a regular day. You have that cold drink in your hand and moisture condenses out of the air, out of thin air, onto that glass. Well, when we were kids, we knew that if we wanted to find mud and bugs, we would roll over a log or lift up a paving stone or a rock. And then we got trained in sprinkler systems and we forgot that wisdom. So now we're employing those techniques. We get rid of the green waste on our projects. If trees have to come down, we use those logs. We create this structure and it harvests water actively and passively for us. It's awesome. So we're going to show you how we do this in a community workshop, and soil and plants are the finishing touch. We always incorporate a tree or large shrub into a hugel to allow the roots to help create a foundational structure. Watch this. So that was with the city of Pasadena. And did anyone notice the Christmas trees going in there? That got everyone so excited that this year over 900 Christmas trees were recycled rather than being hauled away. It was wonderful. Here's a place that we've just completed in La Cañada. It historically had a water issue, so we've got a bioswale in here that captures water, as well as the hugel that absorbs it. And it just gets more and more beautiful each time we visit. Oh yes, hugelkultur can be done on pavement. What if you don't have garden space? You can create garden space. If you have limited garden space, you can build up and create much more planting areas that harvest water on their own, as well as holding water, releasing it to plants when they're ready for it.
And the most fantastic thing about this neglected hugel right now, it's really the native plants that have done quite specially. Buckwheats and the native sunflower and sages are thriving in this hugel. We have to get some more recent photos very soon.
But a year of COVID and that hugel is still producing on top of pavement.
Yeah.
Other ways to return carbon to the soil: mulching, composting, lasagna mulching with cardboard, biochar, we love that, rainwater harvesting as a feedback loop, and plant community-based design. Next, number 3, we want to honor water and invite it to stay. We acknowledge that water is life and is a living being. On every project that we do, we optimize our water resources. The first thing is to do an analysis. And did you know that 1 inch of rain falling on 1,000 square foot roof creates up to 625 gallons of water that can be captured, stored, or infiltrated? This was taken in January at our Altadena Garden Laboratory. We apologize for the fuzziness, but watch the water. This is coming off our studio office, going down into a transit pipe, carrying it across to where we want it in the garden. Notice the neighbor's roof. We're capturing water off his roof and bringing it in here. It daylights at this bioswale, and the bioswale is abutted by a hugelkultur berm. That means that water is moved laterally as well as vertically, and that system increases its water holding capacity for 35 plus years, which is as long as we've studied them in Southern California. So how many 55-gallon rain barrels do you think it would capture that 620 gallons of rain if we were lucky enough to get them? Yeah.
No.
No. So you might look at on the left, there's a Hugelkultur berm and a bioswale capturing water off the road, cleansing the water, infiltrating, and using gravity for overflow. But those hugels suck that water up and hold it until the plants need it. If you're fortunate enough to have the resources for a cistern, you can put this into your backyard, harvest that water during the rainy season, and use it all year long. We can design rain gardens and bioswales to look however we want, but they must be optimized for maximum infiltration and absorption. And that's done through plants and carbon. This practice has so much potential and does not need to conform to any set of standards. Site conditions dictate what you can do, but personality is everything. Every water harvesting project we do has a distinct character of its own. Other ways you can optimize water usage. You can plant native climate appropriate plants, utilize gray water systems, permeable surfaces, support regenerative agriculture, and support fungi. Now there's research showing us that fungal spores in the atmosphere contribute to cloud formation. This isn't silly nonsense. This is from Scientific American. Mushrooms which spring up like tulips after a good soaking themselves make spores that can act as rain seeds, which make the rain that makes more mushrooms. If changes in climate reduce rainfall in ecosystems, the resulting inhibition of fungal growth and spore release may exacerbate the frequency of droughts through this unexpected feedback loop.
Jackie, I think you need to mute. We can hear the background. Thank you.
Once we have the holy trinity of soil, water, and carbon working together, number 4, biodiversity and habitat, food, water, and place. Know that the interconnected web of life is unraveling at an unfathomable speed, and the majority of the planet are not treating this as a crisis. Yeah, 50% of all land-based species going extinct in this century, and we've already lost 50%. Ooh, these statistics make my stomach hurt. 97% of animal biomass today is humans and our domesticated wildlife. Only our domesticated animals, only 3% is wildlife. Imagine that by 2050, there may be no commercial fisheries. There will be more plastics than fish in our ocean. We are in a dire situation. All wildlife need 4 things to survive: food, water, shelter, and places to raise their young. Here's a map of Los Angeles city ecotopes. There are 27 altogether and 17 within the city of Los Angeles. Designed to support biodiversity and habitat, native plants are the first line of defense in preventing habitat loss. Insects are the links between plants and all creatures higher on the food chain. Again, thank you, Doug Tallamy. He wrote Bringing Nature Home. He also pointed out the continental US lost a staggering 150 million acres of habitat and farmland to urban sprawl, and that trend isn't slowing. The modern obsession with highly manicured, perfect lawns alone has created a green monoculture carpet across the country that covers over 40 million acres. These human-dominated landscapes no longer support functioning ecosystems, and the remaining isolated natural areas are not large enough to support wildlife. So this is where we can all step in as a community. Here's a project we just completed in Pasadena, and this is one of our COVID-compliant workshops. This was taken on January 29th, and I wish you could see it right now. The plants and wildflowers are emerging and soaking up the recent rains, and soon it will be buzzing with native pollinators. It is buzzing with native pollinators. Here's a peek into the back garden as well. Every nook and cranny, exposed log or branch, and Hugelkultur berm is an opportunity for habitat enhancement.
And these are a couple new photos. This is a project in Pasadena that we just completed. So this was the streetscape that you saw earlier. And these are the Hugelkultur berms with the bioswale right next to them, which harvests that water for that oak tree in the landscape below. And we reuse materials, all materials on site in the most creative ways, like these tree rings that I think they're a signature touch around trees to help to protect the roots.
And one thing that's not showing is all the neighbors who come by and say, I want to do this.
No, don't they say we're crazy? This is what the lower area looked like, and now it is a buzzing pollinator garden, and this is just in its first year.
So design for biodiversity and habitat enhancement. Base your designs on science. Plants are the basis of everything. They are creating all of the food that drives all food webs, with very few exceptions. They are key to enhancing biodiversity, and it starts with indigenous plants. Number 5, our only hope is if we come together, all peoples, all sizes, all cultures.
The feedback loop can begin through community. Low-income, urban neighborhoods and communities of color are more vulnerable to heat waves and increased temperatures due to the heat island effect. These communities have higher death rates from COVID-19, for example. And just look at these results, that Black Americans have a death rate that is more than twice as high than white Americans. Loss of income from COVID-19 driven recession will push millions of people into food insecurity, and the pandemic has already affected the labor supply and export markets for some food crops and commodities. So I add those slides, and I hope that we've made some important distinctions here. We are living under the myth of separation, the myth of individualism, and the myth of human supremacy. These myths have been going on for too long. Separation is a story, and it is not true. We are not separate from the earth. We are one singular ecosystem, undivided, and everything is interconnected, and we aim to reconnect what has been lost. I imagine that our current lifestyle model might look something like a bowl with cracks in it. So let's just imagine that this is our current landscape model. We waste and squander our most precious resource, water. We waste energy. We continuously pollute our air and water and soils with byproducts. We import and create more waste. And of course, time is valuable as well. Communities are woven from the foundation and interdependence of soil, water, carbon, and biodiversity. And we are attempting to recreate and support a regenerative model that isn't depleted but grows as we grow. But first we must start with soil. And without carbon in the soil, there's no water. And without water in the soil, biodiversity cannot be supported from all 5 kingdoms. And it's all the kingdoms that create and form community. And guess what? Community above and below ground happens to be the feedback loop. What if soil, water, carbon, biodiversity were all given the same rights as humans have? At minimum, the right to exist and thrive. So here's an example of a negative or better feedback loop. Here we are again. So just remember that negative feedback loop is actually better. Pretend it's opposite day. So here's one. Soil absorbs more water when carbon is present. So if living soil is supported, plant life is supported. And if plant life is supported, biodiversity is supported. And that supports a carbon cascade, which supports living soil. The only way we will change the world is by changing ourselves and our day-to-day actions and behaviors. We keep talking about carbon emissions like they're our biggest problem, but that would be an incomplete statement. Human behavior is also our biggest problem. Human behavior drives excessive greenhouse gas emissions. Global action is required to curb these problems. What we are illustrating is that there's a series of powerful solutions that lie in our hands and in our soil and in our gardens and in our community. It's time to be proactive and less reactive. So at Studio Petrichor, we focus on compromise with intent for both parties, our clients and nature. Here's an example of a lovely front garden design template with as an example. So imagine if all residential garden designed with functioning regenerative system practices and principles such as, harvesting rainwater from the roof, if possible. If you've got room for that cistern, store it there for later in the year. Once that overflows, move that water through the landscape. And we always do our best to landform and use landforms in the landscape, such as Hugelkultur. We incorporate plant community-based design using native plants and in community, permeable spaces wherever possible. Just imagine landscapes functioning as living ecosystems, supported by this inspiring relationship. And like this one, wrapping its arms around you like a big hug. We call that the embrace. This garden is a receptacle. It is capturing, inviting, it's abundant because we're nurturing living soils. We're capturing rainwater as much as we can, using landforms to help increase infiltration and biodiversity, breaking up surfaces to increase permeability wherever possible, using a plant community-based approach to support a carbon cascade in the soil, increase infiltration and enhance biodiversity, which in turn will further the cycles of life for all non-human and human beings for generations. So let's get into that garden. Do you see the rain garden in the berm? Let's add some Hugelkultur. When it rains, the garden fills up and it begins to infiltrate. The water moves both gravitationally and laterally, and our Hugel soaks up the moisture and stores it in and releases as needed. We're also pulling the carbon and pollutants from the atmosphere and having that remediated in our soils individually before we send it off into the street and into the ocean. So what else is this garden doing? Cooling the environment. This is from 1959 to 1988, and this is a NASA depiction of the temperatures on the globe up until 1988, and this is what it looks like now. Probably hotter. Here's an example of 2018, 224 locations around the world set all-time record heat highs, and that continues to happen every single year. We test this out at the Arboretum. We took this infrared thermometer and we were testing. You'll see on the left, the temperature at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on a 98-degree day was 144.3 degrees on decomposed granite. And just next to it, a native giant wild rye plant was a 50-degree difference.
And it's unirrigated.
Unirrigated. This is infrared evidence that plants cool the planet. The bottom line, hot bare soil, asphalt, concrete, even sometimes mulch, increases heat island effect, whereas cloud formation, whereas cool covered soil equals cloud formation. So here's a few of our case studies, some of our projects we wanted to share with you. This is the project that was recently on the Theodore Payne Garden Tour this year. It was super exciting. When I walked onto this property and saw this purple and pink house, I knew that I needed to land these clients because they were my kind of folks. And our goal was to honor the architecture of this 1938 colonial revival home with a landscape that represented the time. But how do you do that with wild plants, native plants? Well, we employed those colonial revival features such as axial pathways, alleys of trees, parterres, and really kind of framed the chaos, if you will. We incorporated Hugelkultur berms, rainwater harvesting. We did a watershed analysis to calculate how much water we could capture and keep on site on every project. And most importantly, how could we keep all of the existing materials on site and reuse them creatively? Through saw cutting, through Hugelkultur, through repurposing all of those pavers, cutting them into beautiful sections, creating beautiful grid patterns that honored the design, the classic colonial revival design, and developed this beautiful backdoor natural space with all of those materials. The only materials that left that property were old irrigation pipes. These are some images from last year. This was this last summer. That fountain, all of those concrete pads that you saw in the front, that's what this fountain is made up of. Not one piece of flagstone left this property. This was an exciting project to work with, and it only gets better. This was taken, let's see, last week, and it's super special.
They've become our very dear friends because we share such a love of this garden.
I think all of our clients are our dear friends now. You want to be friends? Let's work together. Let's be friends anyway. This is in La Cañada, that project that you saw earlier. These are pictures taken just 1 week ago. Everything is growing and beautifully, and this was installed just less than 2 years ago. But what you didn't see was in the back, those giant cisterns. And we were able to repurpose all of the cut concrete and create beautiful stairways, beautiful seating, and a beautiful backdoor space that she never wanted to go back to because it's right next to the freeway. Now she can't stay out of that back area. She absolutely loves this garden, and our goal with all of our clients is to get them into the garden. And most importantly, this is why I do it.
They've got you through.
Lee?
So this is the Crescent Farm at the LA County Arboretum. It's 7/8 of an acre that was intended to teach people water harvesting, and it started as the flagship. Can we mute that?
Yeah, I can't. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Valerie.
This started as the flagship for Wildflowering LA, Fritz Haig's project, and it was to have a life of 1 year. My condition for leading this project was that I be able to demonstrate water harvesting. That has been so successful that the garden is now in its 8th year, and it's considered the flagship of the Arboretum. It demonstrates low water lawn substitutes, native plants, food management with minimal use of water, an arid climate orchard, living meadow, year-round meadow. There's that beautiful little orchard is now 3 times that size and produces enough food that our volunteers are fed and our board of directors are fed at meetings. There's an infiltration basin. Can you indicate the?
I'm doing it.
Okay, the swale coming in there. There's a bioswale, collects water off the road, and it infiltrates in this basin. Unfortunately, this basin is sitting on top of a layer of caliche, of lime. It's solid rock. So having dug that out, I then needed to proceed with a pick, hoping that I would break through it and create a truly functioning infiltration basin. It didn't happen. The water sat there. Well, we can't have standing water in Southern California, as you know. So I put cardboard in there. I put mulch over it. I arranged rocks around it. And within 2 months, mycorrhizal fungi, those hyphae exuding acid that can eat through roots of trees, well, it turns out they can also eat through rock. And in search of trees to feed and feed from, they burned right through that, and that water no longer stands in that infiltration basin, and it truly infiltrates. Adjacent to that is blue grama grass, and that is one of the most exciting things to see. Go out about 7 a.m. in the springtime, and longhorned bees, as well as a variety of other native bees, are sleeping on the grass heads. They're sleeping. You can pet them. It's very exciting. And to the right of that is a meadow. And that meadow right now is, yeah, okay, that was midsummer, was not showing up, but it was a meadow and it was filled with birds. Shawn is indicating the hugel there. That hugel was made up of trees that came down in the 2011 windstorm that decimated the Arboretum. We first did an art show with the logs, the hardwood logs, and then what was left over, they said, okay, Lee, what are you doing with them? So I said, I'll make a hugel. And there's the first hugel at the Arboretum that has been so successful. It has inspired many others. It has inspired many people to try this in their home gardens. And we continue to explore this in our Studio Petrichor work. Oh, yes, there's 9, no, 10, nope, actually 13 longhorn bees on that sunflower, and they're sound asleep. Oh, and that meadow, yeah, it comes to life in the springtime and brings in thousands of people. And it changes constantly and is different every year. And it supports hundreds of species of insects and birds. It's delightful.
So one thing that we've learned over the past 3 years is that when we teach, we learn. Sharing this knowledge and these practices is the key to strengthening our connection to each other and to the environment. We have seen a profound ripple effect occurring beyond our own community. Everything right now feels so big and so overwhelming, and rightly so, but in truth, the biggest impacts are really the smallest ones. Every little change we make starting at home and in our backyards has a profound ripple effect. And these are some images from our recent workshops that we bring all people, all sizes, all ages together to do amazing things. How do you move that heavy log?
The self-described puniest member of the workshop.
I can do it with one.
Wow. These to the store or loan?
So this is something that we do on a regular basis, and at the end you'll see in the chat box I'm going to be posting some other events. But we do, these were before pre-COVID workshops, and we've done COVID compliant workshops too for safety, but we can't stop working. We must be in action. We're even working with Pasadena Water and Power right now on 2 demonstration projects near the Arroyo and in Sierra Madre, which is really exciting. And we want to share with you that we have a nonprofit organization, Pollyanna, where we're educating and empowering communities as agents of change to honor and protect natural living systems. I will put these workshops in the chat coming up soon. We've got mosaic workshops because people keep hounding us for mosaic workshops. We have an observation walk coming up with Carol Bornstein in Topanga, and there's another one the following month, and a Hugelkultur workshop in Topanga for summer solstice. And there happens to be a secret, there's a band that's going to be playing at the end of that workshop, if you've heard of Sage Against the Machine. So check out our events page when you get a check.
Are there still openings in the Hugelkultur workshop?
Oh, there are openings right now.
Okay.
So yeah, so we hope you start signing up now. No. So moving forward, soil is our matrix, carbon is the gift, water is life, and biodiversity is the key. But community is the feedback loop. Question: why not challenge designers, technologists, policymakers, and planning professionals to evaluate their proposed actions on their positive, life-sustaining, restorative, and regenerative potential?
Yeah, why not?
Ask yourself, do you want product gardens or process gardens? Can we acknowledge our illusion of control and actually co-create with nature? Can we reimagine a new world building reciprocal relationships with nature? Reciprocity, gratitude, and respect for the land is our way into a thriving future. We'd like to close with a quote from environmental activist and author Joanna Macy. Until we can grieve for our planet, we cannot love it. Grieving is a sign of spiritual health. But it is not enough to grieve for our lost landscapes. We must put our hands in the soil, in the earth, to make ourselves whole again. Even a wounded world is feeding us. Even a wounded world is giving us moments of wonder and joy. We choose joy over despair, not because we have our head in the sand, but because joy is what the earth gives us daily, and we must return the gift. Find your connection to nature and ask yourself, are you gardening like your life depends on it? Thank you. We are Studio Petrichor. We are reimagining resilient homesteads, community sanctuaries, and land regeneration for the future. Thank you.
So we hope you have questions.
If anyone has a question, if you want to raise your hand, how do we do this?
You go to reactions and you click on that and there's a hand.
Okay. So if anyone has any questions, the bottom right-hand corner, you can click on that.
Yes,
And-
up here.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a question.
Yes.
So I have a friend who has a hill behind his property, and this is a community in Thousand Oaks, and they had that severe fire come in almost to their backyard a couple of years ago. So they have the homeowners association clears the brush every year since then, and they keep the hill bare. Now, I know it's past the rainy season now. Is it possible to, so his house is at the bottom of the bare hill. Is it possible to do a design that will capture rain, that will make the whole place green and fire safe?
We would have to see that
Yeah.
in order to assess it. Everything is site specific.
Everything is site specific. So what tends to be the driver, from what I understand, the driver of a lot of these fires is the invasive grasses and the flashy fuels. Being aware of what plants to have, there's a pretty good website out there. I think it's defensiblespace.com. They put some great stuff together, and the Chaparral Institute has excellent information about firescaping and being thoughtful about not destroying habitat while still defending your home, being thoughtful about how to defend your home and not destroying habitat.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's a few comments in the chat I just want to go over. Anessa, I believe that this is being recorded. It's great to have you with us. She says, I so need a recording of today's presentation.
Good.
Thank you. I'm sure it will be available, and Christine can tell us when that will be available.
It will
Be available probably the end of this week or at the latest the beginning of next. And so everyone that signed up for this talk will get a link to this recording. And I
Great.
also put in the chat our CNPS-SD YouTube channel. And if you go there, you can see all of our presentations that we've done so far.
Great. Tammy S., are there any workshops in Northern California? Funny you should mention that. We are working on trying to get one at a farm in Gurneyville, and there's a potential one in, I think, Hillsborough in the Bay Area. So is that Central California? I get so confused.
It is Central California, but it's often called Northern California.
Yeah, so we're working on it. Trust me. Thank you for your comment and your compliment. We want to be doing these workshops wherever possible, and this work wherever possible. And so if you've got a water agency that's in need of bold ideas and bold approaches, then please refer us.
We're bold.
Thank you, Deborah, for your comment. You'll see in the chat box, I added our information about our upcoming workshops and other events and how to connect with us. Thank you. Any more questions? We have tried Hugelkultur, and I have trouble keeping it wet to get it started. Ideas. All right, Maureen, where are you? Where are you? You got to unmute.
Unmute.
Oh, we can't hear you. You have to unmute and tell us. There we go. Where are you located?
Thank you so much. All the ideas look wonderful in your projects. I wish I could see them all right now. When I have tried Hugelkultur, I have trouble getting it started. I live in Valley Center where it's pretty dry, and so getting things going at the beginning has seemed to be difficult for me. I'd like to try it with native plants.
A hot tip for you, Maureen. Plant sunflowers. Those long fibrous roots, and you plant them from seed, those long fibrous roots help kickstart that hugel.
Okay.
focus on plants that are more specific to your area, very site specific. Obviously, you water the hole really well. You might have really hydrophobic soil. It might, where there's carbon in the soil, there's water, right? So amending the soil a little bit might help. There's just little tweaks, but planting it November, December, right before the rains is typically the best bet. And if you're really trying to get something established, you might try Oyas. You know what an Oya is?
Oh, those bowls in the ground.
Try an Oya, and that might help get it kind of kickstarted. But Lee's, the sunflowers absolutely are a great way to do it.
Okay, thank you very much.
Oh, Jim, did you have a question?
So does Dan.
Jim Beister?
Unmute, Jim.
Yes, I have a question about if you plant summer deciduous native plants can you do that in a hugelkultur mound, or is it because I know that they don't want to be watered in the summertime, right? So because I've done that before.
So here's the thing. Your Hugelkultur or the area around it, what hydrozone is it on? When I teach design, I teach how to hydrozone.
Okay.
All of the plants in that area should have the same needs.
Okay.
I tend to, unless I'm working on a restoration project, tend to stay away from drought deciduous plants because, I don't know, they're not as pretty as plants that have foliage year round. So,
yeah, okay.
take, for instance, the canyon sunflower, when it loses its leaves, it browns out. And why try and fight that? You're either going to live with it or choose different plants.
If it's your front yard, you probably don't want to have.
So one of the great things about Hugels is the excellent drainage that they provide for the native plants.
Oh.
And what we find when we take a Hugel apart for whatever reason is that the plant roots are not in the soil where you would expect them to be growing. They're actually growing between the bark on the logs and the wood. And the reason for that, if you pull the bark off, you find roots in there and they are absorbing moisture from the log. Not a whole lot, because a hot, dry summer, there's not a lot of moisture in there. And they are breaking down the nutrient-rich bark. So when we pull the bark off a log, we not only find roots in there, we find soil, really nice soil surrounding those roots that the roots have created themselves.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
something to just consider there is our goal is to, pretty much turn the water off to as needed on as many landscapes as possible. Why are we putting potable water on our landscape? So, choosing those really tough plants to do the job and stick it out. And if you need an area around your house where you like a little bit more of a lush look, there's different ways to look at it, but really focusing on what is really specific to your area. And here's another thing I want to show you. So when you think about the topography of a hugel, the top is going to dry out fast. I love to plant at the brow. Plants at the top tend to dry out much more quickly. So I plant at the brow, and then at the bottom, more moisture collects down at the bottom. So you kind of choose what plants go where. Okay, that's a fun, handy little trick.
And we don't want you to think you don't need to water them at all. You do, but you use much, much, much less water.
Right.
We reduced the water use in the Crescent Farm by 97% over the 80 years that it was a lawn. Yeah, that's a major reduction in water use.
Anne.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm new to native plants and live along the coast in San Diego, northern San Diego. And the sort of soil that I have and the native plants in the area are very different from the soil that seems to be created by the Hugelkultur. And I'm learning that native plants have adapted to kind of crummy soil conditions or not the sort of rich organic soils that are found in East Coast and other places. How does the hugelkultur work with native plants that don't have, they seem to have sort of different soils? I'm not asking this very clearly, but.
So yeah, just to be clear, the hugelkultur doesn't necessarily create that rich soil that you're thinking of. What it does is it just optimizes the soil just enough to support the establishment of plants. Our climate is getting hotter and hotter, and it's drier. Our soils are drying out and becoming hydrophobic. It's harder to get plants established and keep them alive without putting tons of water. It's that optimization is that, and it's that little extra gift to the soil that to us, it's a monument to nature. That's how we look at it. And so that moisture that's going to collect is going to support those plants. Native plants are adaptable, and some are going to grow big and beautiful in the first year, and some need a little bit of a June groom, like something we do in June groom to just keep them at bay. And then they will adapt to that soil. But the crummy that we consider crummy soil conditions across the landscape is really how they've evolved to grow in the landscape. But that doesn't mean that they're specific to that soils, with some exceptions.
So, and if you recall that graphic that showed excavating a depression in order to build the hugel in it, that's your native soil.
Yeah.
And that's what gets layered back into the hugel, along with the green waste and other materials that you might have. So you're not taking it into a luxury situation.
Yeah. Come to my garden. It's not luxury at all, but it's luxury for habitat. I will say that.
I understand. Thank you very much.
Deborah helped us with the hugel in Escondido at Lisa's house. And she's involved with the community garden and wondering if the raised beds could be converted to hugel. Yes.
Oh, we have such fantastic results with that. We have built planter boxes, and then instead of filling them with soil, we've taken our green waste from the site, put it in, layered it in with logs, and used half as much soil because we don't have a big empty planter box. And the vegetables and ornamentals growing in there, it's almost scary, the hybrid vigor that they have. You generally don't see it in a planter box in that way. And a year and a half in, where you would already have added more bags of soil or more compost, we're just now getting to the point where we're going to need to add some more soil in here. But in our non-hugeled boxes, we've added soil many times.
Sue had an add-on to her question.
Yeah, about 6 years ago, there was very little information on the internet about hugel unless you read German or really looked in obscure places. And we had already committed to do 4x8 Corten steel beds. And then I heard something about hugelkultur after they were brought on site. And I didn't want to bring any soil in. I wanted we had dug out all our old raised beds and had everything, in trash cans and so forth. So anyway, we had no idea what we're doing, except kind of what you're saying. I thought, okay, it uses logs and it uses branches and it uses kind of whatever you have around. So for 2 days, we just scoured our property looking for leftover stuff, even a little bit of old concrete down in the bottom that we didn't want to send off to the landfill. And we just layered soil in and leaves and just anything that we could, lumber, all sorts of stuff.
Do you want a job?
Yes.
Do you want a job?
That's what we do, and it works.
And we got it about halfway filled with all of this junk. that we, or not junk, but stuff, that we found on our property. We live on an 8,000 square foot lot in Point Loma. So, we don't have that much stuff. And then we added all of our soil back and compost that we had. The beds are 24 inches deep. And I've been vegetable gardening for like 40 years. I have never had results like this. I'd like to see what's going on way down deep.
Yes.
Maybe they all dig out a section and see what's happening, but it is amazing soil. And I usually add, like maybe 1 to 2 inches of compost, because you lose dirt when you pull stuff out. But it is amazing soil. And so it's, I didn't know anything really about Hugelkultur, but the method worked really well on our raised beds.
I'm delighted to hear it.
Karen, you have your hand raised.
Yes, I live in Spring Valley, in the Dictionary Hill area, and we have mostly clay and loam and some sand. And in my front yard, it's a little bit of an angle of a hill. When I first got here, we had some eucalyptus trees that we were too close to the house. We chopped down and used it to spray in the front yard. So we ended up with a lot of bark, etc., in the area. And so then I started planting natives, and it was all new to me. But this is about 4 years later, and there's been some controversy as to whether I should try and put just tons of rocks, or whether I should continue to put more mulch, more plant type mulch. When I water like the Tree of Life process, which is in the summer, it is 3 solid days once a month, so that it gets really well saturated. This winter, I kind of messed up, not realizing that it was so bad and so dry. I didn't follow with irrigating, or not irrigating, but I water by hand after a mild rain. And so some of the plants are a little unhappy. But I was surprised at how, after watering so much, there really wasn't much water that actually didn't seem like there was that much water that got into the deeper soil, because it was sort of still with the mulch there. I thought, because I did some digging to put in some new plants, Delmar Manzanita, I'm proud to say, and and so surprised that I just got through sprinkling very deeply, and there was no water that much in the soil. And so my question is, should I be working more with rocks? Because you're talking about our soil is not alive, and I do know about mushrooms. I belong to the Mushroom Society, and I know that there are mycorrhizomes in that the mulch that is left there from that tree still, actually. So what do you think?
So where in nature do you see gravel mulch?
In the desert.
In the desert?
Yeah.
But in your area, which would probably be an oak grassland or an oak woodland, maybe?
Or
It's the community is sage.
So Mother Nature, she installs plants to create mulch. Mulch is to protect her skin.
Okay.
Okay, so when we go on our observation walks, we look at the ground plane and observe whether it's, you know, and there's very few coastal pristine wilderness areas because we've done a good job of screwing that up, right? But if you go into an oak woodland, all you're walking on is duff and mulch. That's how she protects her soil. And that's how mycorrhizal fungi, you know, operates. And even in the desert, there's some organic matter, maybe not as much, but you don't see gravel landscapes in nature that often unless it's literally coming down from a hillside and a certain buckwheat is, you know, or you know, monkey flowers are growing from it, right? So those are in the chaparral conditions. So in your case, I would stick with mulch.
Okay.
More mulch.
Okay.
Or mulch.
Okay, so it looks like Anne has her hand up and
Thank
Jim
you.
has a question in the chat box. So Anne,
I
would you like
saw
to-
Jim's.
I want Jim's.
Yeah, oh yeah, so take Jim.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Jim, permaculture. Yes, we study permaculture. We're familiar with permaculture, and we don't use that term because a white man copywriting indigenous practices from around the world just doesn't feel right. We are much more comfortable with traditional ecological knowledge coming from ecologically minded indigenous people. And we work with tribal people, and we try to acknowledge where that information comes from. And it wasn't from the book.
Yeah.
It was from humans with their hands in the soil.
And even the idea of Hugelkultur, you know, the name and what it means, everybody thinks it means this one thing. We're actually thinking of, you know, giving what we do a different process because it's not always a mound. Sometimes it's a huge construct and sometimes it's literally just putting a log next to a tree and letting that become a nurse log. So
and in my backyard, I have
many
swales with logs in them, deep swales with logs in them, and that are called in-ground Hugelkultur, which makes no sense.
Makes no sense.
But it works fantastically well.
So we're taking suggestions on how what we call it.
But thanks for pointing that out. We do owe a debt to permaculture.
Yeah.
And we don't believe in copywriting. We believe in sharing, and the way that information was shared with us and with Bill Mollison.
Yeah. Anne.
Sorry, I think my hand was up from before.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, here we are. Are there any more questions?
I want to point out that there are so many people in the chat box who just are commenting on what a wonderful job you did, how informative. Your slides were great. Your presentation, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Whew.
If you all would like to save a copy of this chat, if you look down at the bottom of the chat box on the right side, you'll see a little square with 3 dots in it. If you click on that, it will allow you to save all these wonderful resources that have been posted in the chat box.
And if you think we're fun now, come to our workshops.
Yes.
Hey, when are you going to have another Shoshugiban workshop?
Oh, that's one
well,
of our fire practices that we would love to share.
That is going to happen. That's probably, I mean, yeah, of course, we're going to do it in the heat of the summer. I am considering building a deck in the front, but it will happen. So just get on our newsletter.
Yeah.
Yeah, come
We
check it out.
torch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're torch singers.
Yeah.
I love Shoshugiban, and for those of you who don't know what it is, it's a wonderful way of preserving wood for making any kind of structure that you're interested in.
Planter boxes to houses, fences, decks, all fire resistant.
Do we have kindred spirits in the landscape design world who are based in San Diego? Well, Lisa Ballora. She has been a devotee of ours for quite some time. And so I don't know. We can certainly consult. Me, Deborah Austin. Look, Deborah.
Yay!
Wave your hand, Deborah.
Oh, Deborah.
Yeah, ask Deborah. She's been to one of our workshops. So, and Deborah, if you ever need a consultant, that's
we're
what
resources.
we do.
That's
we're
what
resources.
All right, well then, if there are no more questions, thank you everyone for coming.
Oh, wait, John has his hand up.
Whoops.
John, you're muted. Can you unmute? John, can you unmute yourself?
Or Jim, can you unmute?
You hear
Oh,
me?
there we go.
Yeah, I had a problem with termites in my house, both subterraneans and drywood termites. And I'm seeing all these logs and they're making me something concerned to start a Hugelkultur in my yard.
So where's your firewood pile?
I don't have a firewood pile. My
Good.
wife's allergic to smoke.
Oh,
Okay.
right. Where termites belong is in old logs in the ground rather than houses.
Yeah.
Yes.
We never situate them right next to a
We're
house.
very cautious about that.
I thought maybe you could suggest a predator for termites that I could.
Nematodes,
Yeah.
termite eating nematodes.
Soil
Yes.
biology takes care of it. You
It
know, I
does.
just go to our website. I just wrote a blog on gophers and how to coexist because they're natives. And here we are trying to destroy them and they happen to be ecological engineers.
Okay.
So we're learning to live with gophers too because they're a part of the soil food web. But we have discussions. We have discussions. Well, thank you, everybody. It was so nice to
Really
be able to
nice.
present to you. And, if you have a group that you want us to present to, please reach out to us.
Bravo, thank you.
Bravo, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Everyone for attending.
Thank you everyone for attending and stay tuned. We have more activities coming up for the summer.
Yay.
Yay.
Wonderful. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.